What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets powered by FTN. Chris Meaney here with you. We are going to break down everything in the NFL. You're watching here on Game Plus Network. Thanks as always for taking the time to hang out. If you're watching live on the Twitter feed or on our YouTube page, smash the like button, leave a question if you have one. It could be a question about tonight. We can take questions about tonight's football game between the Saints and the Seahawks in New Orleans. 4-point favorites, 4.5 depending on where you look. We have some picks for that game, some props, as well as a total. I'm kind of leaning here on the under. I don't think we'll see a lot of offense between these two teams, but we'll break it all down in a little bit. Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros is going to join me. Of course, you know him from the Fantasy Black Book series, also a host over at Fantasy Pros and Sports Grid. He's going to join me in the next segment. He's going to hang out for a couple segments. We'll talk all things Week 7, turn the page here into Week 8, preview a little bit from tonight. I also want to get his thoughts on who he thinks are legit Super Bowl contenders. So I'm going to throw out some Super Bowl odds at Joe as well. Maybe an opportunity to jump in on some teams. Basically 7 weeks in the books. And the AFC, the top of the board looks like this. Cincinnati, 5-2. Las Vegas, 5-2. Tennessee, after wins against the Bills and yesterday against the Chiefs, holding them to 3 points, 5-2. Just like we drew it up, right? And that's the biggest takeaway for me. I'm going to get Joe's thoughts on what he thinks is the biggest takeaway here. It's like 7 weeks into the season or just from yesterday in general. It's the Bengals in Cincinnati. We had them to cover here at 6.5. I wish I had the stones to put them on some parlays. I'm not going to lie. I didn't pick them in my own pool where you can pick your own team and your own spread. I had Baltimore by 1 point. I thought this game would be pretty close, but I thought at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson and company would get it done. Credit to the Bengals. Like, this is a good football team. They really are. It is the same team that lost to the Chicago Bears earlier in the season. We have to keep that in mind, but that was early in the year when Joe Burrow was just coming off the significant knee injury, the offseason surgery, maybe not feeling 100%, some rust there. You remember all the rust? It feels like years ago when Jamar Chase just couldn't catch a pass in practice and everyone was freaking out about him. But now he has, 774 yards roughly? I think I got it written down here. Come on, Meaney, let's figure it out. 754 receiving yards, the most ever through 7 weeks for a rookie wideout. He is balling out. He looks really good. That spin move, I mean, that's the big takeaway for me. Joe Burrow throws for 400 yards yesterday, and that Jamar Chase is over 200. The spin move on Humphreys and takes it to the house. It seems to be getting a touchdown every single game. And the Bengals defense is good. And I think, Tino and I were chatting before we got on here about Cincinnati. And I think a lot of people will just go to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And, Higgins had a lot of targets yesterday and didn't do a whole lot with them. CJ Uzomah has 3 targets, 3 grabs, and he finds the end zone twice. It was tight end day, national tight end day. And yesterday, a bunch of average, I don't want to call Uzomah average. I mean, he's better than average. He's pretty good, actually. There's just a lot of bodies there, and he doesn't get a lot of targets. But there were some other tight ends who just popped off and got some touchdowns. Good for them. But this Bengals defense is good. They're strong. They really are. In years past, you could run all over this team, and, you could never take them. You couldn't really give them the respect, I think. Even last year when they were scoring points with Joe Burrow without Chase, they were scoring points, they were moving the ball on offense, but defensively they couldn't hang in games. Like, teams were just running all over them and throwing on them. Mostly running on them over the past couple of years, but this year, I mean, Lamar Jackson is a guy that's really had his way with the Bengals. Small sample size, really, despite being in the division and seeing him a couple times a year. He is just run all over them. Yesterday just wasn't the case. They held them in check, and I thought, that game was tight for the most part until the end. Midway through the third, the Bengals really broke it open. So here we are after 7 weeks of the season. This team is 5-2, and the Raiders are also 5-2, and the Chiefs are sitting here after 7 weeks with a lot of questions. They're 3-4. They're bottom of the division. They got to flip the switch in a hurry. I mean, to only score 3 points against the Titans, let's give the Titans all the credit in the world. They were able to do whatever they wanted to do on offense, and that's been Kansas City's problem for the most part, is defense not being able to stop anybody, but also the turnovers. Now they lead the league in turnovers. Mahomes got a pick in 6 straight games. He threw the pick, and you could say, fine, is another tip pass. I think it was Josh Gordon, maybe potentially tipped that one, put it up in the air. But what about the play when he's running, when he's scrambling? Like, he's running with the ball, he's not protecting it, and, that's on him. And, he lost the football there yesterday. So I think the Chiefs are going to be okay, but they don't have the personnel defensively To me, there's a. I'm thinking like I'd rank them 6 or 7 in terms of like if I did my own power rankings, which I don't. But obviously, there's a ton of great teams in the NFC. You got Arizona at 7-0. The Rams, the Bucks, the Packers are all 6-1. The Cowboys are 5-1. All those teams look much better than Kansas City right now. And then you got Buffalo, who are Super Bowl favorites with the Bucks right now. Even though the loss to Tennessee the last time out, I think that they're in better shape than Kansas City. And the Titans, I'm not fully buying into Las Vegas. I do like their offense. I've been on the show and I've talked about it before. Last year, the offense was good. People are talking about Derek Carr now. They didn't talk about him last year. They probably should have. He was good last year, and he's great so far this season. This is a team that scored 30-plus points 4 times. They've been in every game. They've beaten the Ravens. They beat the Chiefs last year. They almost beat them twice last season, and that was a Chiefs team that had a much better defense and was taking care of the football. They did lose to the Chargers in a tight one, and, last week against Denver, they really had their way with the Broncos, and they certainly had their way with the Eagles yesterday. So we'll keep an eye on them moving forward. They have a bye, but the big game for them will be when they play Kansas City to see where they really do stack up inside the AFC West. So Joe Pisapia is going to join us here in a little bit. We're going to roll through some waiver wire pickups. There's really not a lot. There's only 2 teams on bye this week, so thankfully, with 6 teams on bye and a lot of injuries, it was rough out there, I think, for a lot of fantasy owners. But when we get to the top performers at each position, some of these waiver wire pickups did okay for you. I think so, at least this week. I don't want to speak for everybody. I had to start David Johnson in a league yesterday, and he did nothing for me. Devontae Freeman, I had to start him as well. Luckily, he found the end zone. 7 games on the ice here tonight in the NHL. We're going to talk picks. We're going to talk shot props. 9 games on the hard court in the association here this evening. I got a couple picks on the way out in the NBA. Of course, the Monday Night Football game between the Saints and the Seahawks. And then the World Series happens tomorrow. That's the beginning. It is the Braves, the Atlanta Braves. Shout out to Tenacious D. Jones for his Braves. I got a future at 10-1 that I made in December on Atlanta. I did not think that they would be here. I'm not going to lie. The second that they lost Ronald Acuna Jr., I thought that was going to be it for Atlanta, and they've had a lot of injuries with their pitching staff, but here they are. Eddie Rosario, another strong game. Like Eddie Rosario again? Are you kidding me with this guy? What a story. And the Dodgers are out. The Braves are in, and they're going to face the Astros. I don't think I'm going to hedge. There's no real value on Houston. I do think right now I'm leading Houston, unfortunately, to win the World Series, but it's a 10-1, 1 unit. Maybe I'll throw something. If you tailed and you got the Braves, you may want to hedge depending on your situation. But I think I'll probably just ride this out. There's really not a lot of value there with the Astros. I did want to roll through quickly the position by position leaders, something that we've been doing here on Monday. So Joe Burrow, the number 1 fantasy quarterback yesterday, 29 fantasy points, 416 passing yards, had 3 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift is the number 1 running back. This is a half-point setting, 25.4. He would have been there in a full point as well because he got 8 of his 10 targets for 96 yards. I don't know if you caught the Prize Picks video that I do on Thursdays. It's free over at FTN Daily. I do it every Thursday. Every Friday, where I break down just like my favorite Prize Picks props. And I post that in the free Prize Picks Discord channel. You can get there by visiting ftndaily.com, clicking that chat link up at the top. Prize Picks is super fun. It's a simple over or under on a player's prop or their fantasy score, and you can mix and match across all the sports that you love, and they're all happening here in October. DeAndre Swift, there's some edges over at Prize Picks. His receiving yard prop is at 35.5. Most books had him at 44. At least I saw some 47.5. I saw one at 51.5, and he hit it, I think, on the second play of the game. So he had a monster game, 13 carries for 48 yards, but he did have 96 receiving yards and had the touchdown there. But a shout out to all these other running backs. So the following running backs finished as top 12 running backs this week in fantasy. Damian Harris, a solid game, scored another touchdown. Dearness Johnson, right? The big performance on Thursday. Brennan Bolden, Khalil Herbert, Myles Gaskin, Kenyon Drake, of course, Taylor, but Samaje Perine. Actually, I got Taylor down here. It's Jonathan, yes, but JJ as well, because he had a touchdown. Right? Like, what a crazy week that all these running backs, who you picked up? Johnson, you picked, Bolden probably wasn't played at all. Khalil Herbert was actually dropped 10%. His ownership dropped 10% over the past 24 hours, leading in, it was like from Friday to Saturday evening with news that Damian Williams would be active. People just dropped Herbert. He had 100 yards against a strong Bucs defense. Myles Gaskin, we talked about him so many times in this show. Most added, most dropped. Here we go. Kenyon Drake got, for Drake, he got lucky. Jacobs left and Drake was fine. Jacobs would have been well on his way to a top 5 performance. J.J. Taylor, like nobody was grabbing that guy. And Samaje Perine, a buddy of mine texted me like Perine or Chris Evans. It's like, oh man, really? I think I'd lean Chris Evans because maybe he'll catch a few passes in this game, and it was the wrong call. So apologies to that dude. But a lot of random running backs finishing as top 12 backs for week 7 of the fantasy football season. Cooper Kupp, of course, rinse repeat. Number 1 wide receiver, 32 points, 13 targets, 10 grabs, 165 yards and 2 touchdowns. Shout out to Chase, who finished number 2. With 201 yards and a touchdown. CJ Uzomah, your top tight end with 3 targets, 3 grabs, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Your number 1 defense is Tampa Bay, of course, against Chicago. But your number 2 defense for the week, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans against the Kansas City Chiefs, right? There's no way I would have ever played them against KC. No way. They held them to 3 points, and they had 16 fantasy points. We got to talk about the Chiefs. I got to get Joe Pisapia's thoughts on the Chiefs. What the heck's wrong with them? Are they going to be okay? Should we take shots on them to win the Super Bowl? Are they going to get back? What about all that dynasty talk? Remember when people were talking dynasty with the Chiefs? Like, don't you have to win 2 in a row to be a dynasty? Like, you can get to the Super Bowl a couple times in a row, but if you're not winning them, you're not a dynasty. I mean, that talk could be put to bed, I think. We'll talk about a lot of teams, good and bad, here on Mean Streets. Don't go anywhere. Joe Pisapia is in here next. Keep her locked. This continues on Game. Hey, there's the old boy, Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros. Of course, you know him from the author of the Fantasy Black Book series. Of course, as well, the host over at Sports Grid. You're watching Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Joey, what's up, man? Thanks for taking the time, dude.
What's happening, my brother? I'm in a good mood today. The Patriots had a romp. That was a very good time for me. Finally got a W, but Bipocalypse is basically on its way out now. So we can finally move on past week 7, and I think that's a good thing for all of us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was listening off the running backs that finishes top 12 running backs this week, and it's pretty brutal, man. Like, I think JJ Taylor ended up inside the top 12 or 13 because, like, as you said, the Pats just rolled. So they were able to lean on other guys inside the offense there. Man, there are a lot of takeaways, I think, from week 7. Like, what is your biggest? It looks like you're rocking a little bit of orange there. Is this like Bengals orange here today?
No.
It's red and okay, I got you. I misread.
It must be some weird filter I have on. I've got to use a lot of filters on this face. By the time we get it right, it takes days, but there are a lot of takeaways. I think first and foremost, I think you could say that the Tennessee Titans, I think, are back, and the team that lost to the Jets just a few weeks ago is now out there just dismantling the Chiefs, who went to the Super Bowl last year. So I think right off the bat, I think that's a big one that let's reinvest in Tennessee. Let's reinvest in Tannehill. Obviously, Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry, but I think we're also looking at A.J. Brown, which we were talking about even a couple weeks ago on the show. It's like now's the time to kind of buy A.J. Brown because as long as the health is trending in the right direction, the matchups going forward are really good. So I think that was a big takeaway. And I think another one on the flip side of that same game is there's clearly some issues there with the Kansas City Chiefs. The balance of this offense has been a problem. When they started to go right again, it was right before Clyde Edwards-Helaire got hurt. Even last week, too. I mean, that first half of that game was terrible against Washington, and then they turned it on, and they were able to overcome. But the Chiefs are just not right now. And the Super Bowl hangover, I think, is a real thing. We've talked about it before, you and I, many times. And I think most of us thought, well, Mahomes can get past that. But you know what? Maybe he can't. Maybe this is just one of those years where things aren't going right for the Kansas City Chiefs. And from a fantasy perspective, too, you had a lot of big investments in those big 3 guys. And I don't know if they've really played up quite to the level they were supposed to. They've been good, but they haven't been great all collectively in, I think, a few weeks now.
Yeah, Jake asked me this morning on his show if I would buy. It's like, of course I would buy, but who's giving up Kelsey? Who's giving up Hill and Mahomes? Like nobody's going to give up these guys. And yeah, it is really weird to see. I know a lot of the picks haven't really been on Mahomes. There's been some tip passes and stuff like that, but he had that one run where, he lost it and he just kind of sat on the field. He just looked like like everything has gone right for him. Right? Like there's been no adversity really at all in the short career here that he's had in the NFL. But when he lost that fumble, he just sat there. Like he just sat and he put his head down and it was just like a kid who, lost, I don't know, like a little league game or something like that. He felt so sad. And I kind of felt for him for a moment. Then I'm like, it's the Chiefs. They'll be fine. They'll turn it around. But I'm sitting here looking at the Super Bowl odds and the Bills and the Bucks are plus 550. The Rams are 8-1. Arizona's 9-1, Green Bay and Baltimore are 12-1, and then you get into Dallas and Kansas City at 14-1. Like, would you take a shot on the Chiefs at 14-1? Or are you thinking that this team just doesn't have the personnel defensively? Like they've been put in such tough spots where I think this has happened for a while now. We just haven't really dove into it too much because their offense has been so good. But even when they went to the Super Bowl last year, and heck, when they went and they won against San Fran, weren't they down by double-digit points in every single game leading up? This is a team that's been playing from behind for quite a bit, and I think it's kind of catching up to them.
It is catching up to them. And even when they won the Super Bowl, that defense wasn't very good. They just kind of got hot at the right time and started to create some turnovers a couple years ago when they beat San Francisco. But I don't love this as an investment. Yeah, if you love it, this is the time to invest in it because it's at its all-time low. But, kind of going back to the Titans, if you think about the Titans right now and the teams that they've actually beaten, they've beaten the Bills, right? They've beaten the Chiefs. I mean, the Titans are a team I think we should start talking about more. And in the AFC, I understand that it was not a good day for the Baltimore Ravens, but I still think that's a pretty good football team there. The AFC, to me, the Bills are still that team to beat. They're the best in terms of most complete team. They play very strong in the secondary. It's a very physical group back there. You've got the big-time quarterback, and you've got some more weapons there for Josh Allen this year that I think are, really kind of popping a little bit. It's a shame Dawson Knox got hurt, but to me, it's still the NFC. The NFC, Brady's at the top right now too. Again, it's just unbelievable, Chris. I don't know when it's going to end. I don't think it's ever going to end at this point. He could play till he's 50, and I think all of us would go, yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's not slowing down. That's the other thing. It's just not slowing down when it comes to Brady. The Rams might be the most complete team, though, in the NFC. And then if you want to take a dart throw on a team to me right now, why not the Cowboys too? I mean, the Cowboys defensively playing much better. Dan Quinn's got them playing much better as a unit. Micah Parsons has been terrific. Diggs, although you can throw on him, he is showing that he can create big-time turnovers literally every single week. And I think from an offensive standpoint, the Cowboys are really tough to guard. So I think if you're looking for a long shot, I wouldn't be looking for the Chiefs. I'd be looking for the Cowboys right now. That's the one that, to me, is a little bit more interesting to at least get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's a good call. I like Dallas too, and I've come around on them because of their defense, right? Offensively, I think we knew that they would be one of the better offensive teams, but I think they're just playing much smarter football now. Like McCarthy's had still some mismanagement, and that stuff's just going to continue. But it's a more balanced attack. It's not just Dak dropping back and throwing the ball 40 plus times. They're using both running backs, and they just can't seem to be stopped right now on offense. And they're making it happen on defense. But you're right. I mean, the NFC with Arizona at 7-1, the Rams, the Bucks, the Packers all at 6-1, Dallas at 5-1. So it's a tough path to get through there. I agree with you, man. I think we should talk about the Titans a little bit more. I think people just talk about Henry and that's it. I mean, yesterday they ran the play. Tannehill got whatever he wanted. Like a buddy of mine texted me this morning, like, Tannehill stinks. It's like, dude, did you watch the game? Like, Tannehill was basically perfect in that game yesterday.
He didn't have to do more than he did. He
hardly threw the ball in the second half.
They just didn't. Yeah.
They didn't need to, right? So he was efficient even with Julio not being 100%. He was able to chip in here and there, and A.J. Brown had that good game. And then Derrick Henry is just not slowing down. It seems like you and I have always been in this Henry camp, and people just make excuses for him and make I even see dynasty rankings, and he's not even in the top 12 in running backs. It's like, guys, like, I understand, like, you want to look ahead, but what are you even doing? How are you not going to take this guy in a dynasty startup as a top 12 running back? Like, figure it out in a couple years. He's the best running back in the game, Joe, and it's not even close, man.
No, it's not. And I think it's high time we start to understand that, respect that. And I understand they're always concerned about the workload. But yet we're talking about workload and concerns, and yet these are the same people who would constantly be putting Christian McCaffrey ahead of him, right? And Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, guys who have had big workloads and also injury histories and that bad combination. Saquon Barkley, same kind of thing. And you look at Derrick Henry, and yes, the workload is a fair argument. It's a fair concern. But at the same time, I mean, when do we stop and go, it's not affecting him yet? When it starts to slow him down, when it starts to affect him, then we can all panic and worry about it. But it hasn't been anything close to that yet. And he's throwing passes yesterday. It's unbelievable. The other big takeaways, too, I think, from this week, Chris, are we got two guys that are looking like absolute stars in the league. And the first one is Jamar Chase, and the other one is Kyle Pitts. I mean, Kyle Pitts so far in these last two games is starting to look like the player we all thought who he might be. And if you bought low on him in any sort of redraft indoor dynasty league after the first couple of weeks where he's scuffling a little bit, my goodness, it is paying off. I mean, I know the matchups have been good, but still, 100 yards back-to-back for a tight end. I don't even think he's a tight end. I don't know what he is, but he's special. That's all I know, and so is Chase.
Yeah, he is special, man. Yeah, you're right. And in the fact that they move him all over the field, he doesn't really line up as a tight end, even though he could, and he's just a mismatch all over the place, especially when I feel like he does line up in the middle of the field against those linebackers. It's just, it's too easy for Matt Ryan. Now, it's, Calvin Ridley owners are like, oh no, it's all Pitts and Cordell Patterson, but at least Ridley caught a touchdown yesterday. That's where I was going to go next. Like, which of these 5-2 AFC teams do you believe in more? Is it Cincinnati or Las Vegas? I think I know your answer is Cincinnati, but
it is, and it's because of the defense. Honestly, I mean,
right.
That's the thing. If you go back to last year when that Cincinnati defense beat the Steelers on primetime television, and everyone was looking around like, "What happened?" If you watched carefully, Mixon was not there, Burrow wasn't there. Really, nobody was paying attention to it, except nerds like us, right? We were watching all these games, and the Cincinnati defense started to play better, and then they made some key additions to that defense. The secondaries played well there. Bell's played terrific. Bates came back healthy the last couple weeks and played well. And I think when you start to look at Hubbard's had a very good season too. I think if you're starting to look at these individual guys, they don't have the star power, right? There's no Bosa, there's no Garrett, there's no Aaron Donald, there's no guy they're like, oh my goodness, who's this guy on this defense? They just play well as a unit. And they're starting to get some confidence and some swagger, and they're going in and they're competing in some of these big games. And sometimes, they still look like the Bengals, like Joe Burrow did a couple weeks ago against the Bears. But then you look at it, they don't fold up the tent and go away. And that's the thing that's different about this Bengals team, because they have the confidence of a guy like Burrow. When things do go badly for them, they don't fold up, they don't disappear. Instead, they go out there and they continue to fight and they continue to play. And right now, I mean, Joe Burrow looks fantastic. Jamar Chase looks like a top 3 wide receiver in the league. And I'm not being hyperbolic, I think, when I say that. I think it's just the reality of where we're living right now is you got to put him in that caliber. He is closer to Devontae Adams and closer to potentially, who else do we want to put in that Cooper Kupp? Those are the only two guys I think we can put ahead of him realistically right now.
Yeah, I think so. And if you're doing like a dynasty or you're thinking dynasty leagues, your team's out of it, like where do you rank Joe Burrow among dynasty wideouts? He has to be 2 or 3. Like a couple weeks ago, I had the debate with D Burrow about him or AJ Brown or him or DK, and I'm just like, now I'm thinking, I don't know, like Russell Wilson's future in Seattle. Where is
Right,
it seems pretty cloudy. Yeah, it's unknown. Tannehill's good. AJ Brown is obviously pretty strong, but Burrow and Chase, these guys clearly have a connection, and they can't be stopped.
No, and look, I think Chase is absolutely a first-round pick in a dynasty league startup next year. Joe Burrow is absolutely, I would think, a top 8 quarterback probably in a dynasty league, and. And there's still enough for Higgins to be a good player. I mean, Mixon looks very sharp. He's got a contract for another couple of years. They paid him. So the Bengals actually, believe it or not, look like a really good investment. Maybe I should have worn orange. Maybe I should have represented the Bengals today. But that was a great game. That was the game of the day. I think we can all agree on that. And it was incredible to watch because there were moments where Baltimore could have asserted its dominance, and the defense showed up on that Cincinnati side. I think they should be really pleased. And this week, they're only owned, I think, in 30% of leagues right now, the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And they've got the Jets this week. So, I mean, come on, let's go. Start getting that waiver wire right now.
I think you actually undersold them. They're 17 in Yahoo, but they have been really good, man. I mean, 5 sacks yesterday. They started off the season with 10 sacks in their first 3 games, and I think that game against Chicago, like Burrow had a couple of mistakes, but that's it. It is crazy to think like the teams that they've beaten and then they lose to Chicago and then Tennessee loses to the Jets, but then they rattle off those wins. Those things obviously just happen here and there in the NFL. I want to get your thoughts on Mac Jones a little bit. You are rocking Patriots. I was fooled. I thought you'd come in here with the Bengals. I want to get your thoughts on Mac Jones just a little bit, and we'll hit the waiver wire. I mean, it's really slim pickings, Joe. There's not a lot to really talk about. Well, we could talk about the Eagles' backfield a little bit. We didn't really give a lot of love to Las Vegas, but here's the stat. So yesterday, Derek Carr picked them apart. I mean, I think his only incompletion at one point was just like a tip pass. I believe he was like 19 for 20. So listen to this. This is from Ruben Frank. In the Eagles' first 1,285 games, they allowed 8 quarterbacks to complete 80% of their passes. In the Eagles' last 5 games, they've allowed 4 quarterbacks to complete 80% of their passes. So I don't want to take anything away from Las Vegas and the Raiders' offense. They are on a bye here. They're 5-2. They're off to a really good start 7 weeks into the season. Carr does look like, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Like, he's an underrated quarterback. You and I have chatted about him before as like a super flex when we did like previews. But we're starting to see that offense kind of take shape. I don't know. Maybe they just need to kick Gruden out of there because now they're throwing to Edwards and they're throwing to Henry Ruggs. These guys are getting involved in the offense, so it looks a little bit better. But I'm still a little, I don't know, man. I'm still a little unsold.
It's hard. I don't blame you. It's tough it's still hard for me to believe in the Chargers, and it's still hard for me to believe in the Raiders right now. But both of them are in it because Kansas City just continues to I don't know what it is. It's just this intangible weird thing where sometimes when you lose a Super Bowl the next year, things just don't go well. It's a mental thing. It's a disappointment. It's a hangover, as you want to call it. But you can go back to the Cam Newton 15-1 year and that loss. You can go back to the Matt Ryan year after they lost that Super Bowl in a bad fashion. That team would never, you could argue they've never recovered from that. It goes on and on. The only guys in the last 15 years to buck that trend are named Russell Wilson and Tom Brady. That's it. Every single quarterback the next year, Jared Goff had a terrible year after they lost the Super Bowl. You can go back and just check me on it. There's only 2 guys. It's Brady, Hall of Famer, probably the greatest to ever do it, so it doesn't matter. He doesn't count. And then Russell Wilson, who's probably going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback when all is said and done as well. But right now, it is tough to buy into the Raiders. I think what you're seeing with the Raiders, though, is it's a good... it's a better diversification of the offense where they're not so Darren Waller focused, and it's out of necessity because of his health and because he was out last week. But even the last couple weeks, you've seen Ruggs have some big plays. You've seen Kenyon Drake kind of start to maybe pick up the playbook a little bit more, or maybe he's just, being used differently. It's hard to gauge exactly what's going on, but we've seen this before where a coach gets fired and a team rallies behind and plays well, and they rally with each other and the new coach. So it's not surprising. That division, to me, is wide open. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens because I don't think the Broncos are any good either. So I don't know what's going to happen there. But going back to the other question about Mac Jones, too, I think Mac Jones has played pretty good football this year. I think Mac Jones should have been given the opportunity in the rain against Tampa to have gone for that, 4th down instead of kicking a 50-something yard field goal in the rain. I think that offense was moving well, and they looked like they were throwing the ball pretty well. I know he's a rookie quarterback, but at the same time, if you look at all the rookies right now, it's hard to argue that he hasn't played the best. And that's including Trevor Lawrence here. Justin Fields was another awful day for him. Trey Lance not even on the field, yesterday. And I think when we're stepping back and getting that perspective, every week Mac Jones gets a little more confident. He's another guy that does not fold up the tents and go home when things don't go his way. You go back 2 weeks ago to that Cowboys game, you could have said, oh, after that pick six, things would have gone the other direction. Well, they didn't. He came back, threw another touchdown to Kendrick Bourne. Next thing you know, they're in overtime, and it doesn't go their way. But the Patriots are a very dangerous team right now because they play defense, they run the football, and they found something here with Hunter Henry, and they found something here with a couple of these other guys where they look very comfortable. And I think they're going to be a very dangerous team down the stretch. I don't think you're going to want to play the Patriots in the second half of the season. No. I still don't think they're a playoff caliber team. But if things break their way and they end up on that new thing where no one's 8-8, right? Someone's going to have a W there. If they end up as a 9-win team, they might make the playoffs in the AFC the way things are going.
I think they're getting in. I had them as one of my playoff teams heading in. They got some bodies back on defense, guys that opted out. And yeah, I mean, you just can't count out. They spent all that money. Like Bill Belichick was like, that's it, man. Were you kidding me? We can't. 2 years in a row not making the playoffs. We got to find a way. And you're right. They are clicking. And Mac Jones definitely does look like the best rookie quarterback. Joe, hang around for one more segment. We'll try to hit the waiver wire. I know it's tough. There's only 2 teams on bye this week, but we will dive into a couple unknown players that could potentially help you out moving forward. Don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. You're watching Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney and Mr. Black Book Joe Pisapia 17. You got the baseball book just already starting now to get the chapters together. I'm going to be taking part in that. When's that coming out? December-ish?
Thank goodness you're taking part of it. I can tell you right now, December 15th. That's the thing. And I promised myself I wouldn't even start to think too much about the baseball until we got to at least November. I want to get past Halloween, want to get past the flag football season where I'm coaching, but I had no choice because the demand is there, thank goodness. So you and a phenomenal group of people like Paul Sporer, yourself are going to be helping out with the Black Book this year for baseball. So that'll be out for Christmas time because people want it under the tree. That's what they want. So
it's a good gift.
It is, right?
It's a great gift. It's very affordable and it's just like filled with so much information. Yeah, I love it. And it's fresh too. I like to do this, right away. I mean, get the World Series starting tomorrow, but it's still fresh, like some baseball stuff in your mind. And you'll update it when things happen with cheat sheets and when guys move around as well. I was going to ask you about the Lady Titans. Like, how's that going?
It's good. Hey, we are now 6-1. We are the 1 seed in the playoffs. So Lady Titans, nice. My daughter's 3rd through 6th grade all-girls flag football from NFL Flag. Actually, I believe I'm rocking the shirt. Where is it? Oh, there it is.
There it is.
The shirt today. Look at this, nice. Representing the NFL flag. It is a phenomenal thing. I encourage anybody out there, if you have one anywhere in that area, get your kid involved. The flag football really teaches them the game. And I gotta say, I've got a great group of girls playing every week. They're excited. Hopefully we win our first matchup of the playoffs and we go on to a championship and then we'll take it from there. But man, nice. It has been a tough year, as you know, for me this last couple months with losing some good friends. And flag football, who'd have thought coaching flag football is the thing to get you through the good vibes on Saturday afternoons, man. It's the way to go, man. It is so much fun. And get your daughters involved, dads out there.
Yeah, they have the kids have a smile on their face, kind of puts you into a good spot as well. No football around these parts for me, but I do some coaching for hockey, and it does, it's nice to step away for a little bit, and the kids are having fun. It puts a smile on your face as well, and it's nice to kind of get back and teach them a thing or two. Let's bring Tino's got. I think Tino does some coaching as well, football. Tino's got some boards here for us. Like, these guys are not great here. Like, Tino, would you throw up the running backs? Throw up the running backs here. We only got about 4 or 5 minutes to get through this, Joe, but we got some running back rankings here. These are guys that are under 50%, so maybe we won't get the board up. Tino's having some issues there, but I'll throw the names at you. Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, Boston Scott, Ty Johnson, Brennan Bolden. So I got Bolden in there. I just, I was surprised to see Ramondre Stevenson inactive. I don't know what that was, but for the Eagles situation here, it looks like Miles Sanders is going to miss a little bit of time with the ankle injury. I don't think it's significant, and Philly hasn't been running the football all that much, but yesterday it was Boston Scott who was getting the carries, and Gainwell, who was like the pass catcher. I thought potentially that when I was watching the game that I thought maybe they were thinking Boston Scott is the better, pass blocker here, that he's going to be the guy that gets in there and gets that first and second down work. But if you had a choice between one of the two, who would it be?
It's still Gainwell for me, because that's the guy that this group invested in. So Sirianni and the coaching staff and everybody, that's the guy that they drafted. So to me, they've inherited Miles Sanders. They've inherited Boston Scott. I think they want to see what Gainwell can do. Plus, Gainwell in the PPR league is going to give you those catches, right? So that's far more useful at that point. You're getting a point every single time. So he gets 4 catches. That's the equivalent of him rushing for 40 yards. Like, let's just keep that in mind. So even though Boston Scott is going to get some play here in this game this week against Detroit, the other guy, it's very tough too, because you don't know how long this injury is going to go, but you might have a sneaky opportunity to add Peyton Barber this week too. That's another, I think, running back you look at. And then, the Patriot guys are impossible. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson was inactive. Nobody saw that coming. He could very well be active this week and be the leading guy. Like, you have no idea what's going on. Harris is Harris. He's going to have his workload. Who that secondary guy is, Brandon Bolden, now Taylor, who was a non-entity for the last couple weeks, all of a sudden he's shown up, scoring 2 touchdowns. It's maddening. And you know what? It's a really good matchup on paper, but I think Harris is the only one you can really feel good about going in. The rest are just dart throws.
I know. I put Ty Johnson on there because I feel like with Mike White, all I saw yesterday from that guy was just like check down, check down, check down, check down. So I think that's decent for Carter, but Ty Johnson was in there. That's why I lean him over Bolden, because what you just said. I mean, you just don't know in New England, but it just seemed like Bolden has a bit of a role inside that offense. Here's a few wide receivers as well. I don't know if Tino is back with us. I think something crashed. It's all right. The live television, right? Things happen. We're still rolling here.
We know. We're professionals.
We're professionals. I got Rashad Bateman on here, Michael Gallup, Darius Slayton. Here we go. Darius Slayton. Now, the Giants play the Chiefs on Monday, but who knows, who's going to be available for the Giants? Is Shepard going to be back? Is Kenny Golladay? So, I mean, proceed with caution, I suppose, there. KJ Osborne, Jamison Crowder. Needed one more catch from Crowder yesterday. I got burned on that because it was just check down Mike Light. T.Y. Hilton's on this list. Alan Lazard showed up a couple weeks in a row, but MVS could come back here. Khalif Raymond is back-to-back weeks with a decent showing in terms of targets. Van Jefferson's always on this list. I don't know if you could ever trust him, but he's just a nice stash in deep leagues. And then Russell Gage showed up. It's his first game in a while. I guess the top of the board is, interesting. Like Bateman, are you into... I'm sure he's owned in most competitive leagues. Would you flip him thinking that Sammy Watkins is coming back, or is this a guy that's just going to continue to trend up? Because he's a big name, Joe, and you know how people like rookies.
They do, but you know what? I think Bateman is a rookie to like, because I think there's a need there for Bateman too, because Brown's been so good. That means that him being back and being something in this offense, and he's been a wide receiver 1, then Mark Andrews playing as well as he has most of this year, that frees up a lot of targets potentially and a lot of one-on-one coverage for Bateman. So even though Bateman's on a bye, he would still be that number 1 pickup for me. I agree. And people might not be on him this week because it's the bye and they get frustrated adding those players.
Right.
But I think Bateman should be. Gallup should be. A lot of leagues, Laviska Shenault's been dropped. He's only rostered in 60% of leagues overall right now because of the buys and people had to drop him. So pay attention to all those people that got dropped this past week because teams got squeezed on the buy. There might be some interesting names out there. Will Fuller could be another one too, potentially might get him back. So that's another one that I would throw out there. But KJ Osborne, I think, is also a decent one. Gallup is probably the strongest and the safest of that grouping, but that's the way you look right now. In the tight end position too, I mean, you got crazy guys like CJ Uzoma, who's either, tight end 1 overall in the week or tight end 30. There's nothing in between. Mo Alley Cox. I mean, there's some names out there you could grab and hope for the best. But again, Cincinnati's got a really good matchup. Grab that Cincinnati D, maybe grab the tight end, see what happens against the Jets and Mike White.
Yeah, Mike White. Yeah, it's a good call. I'm glad you brought up Laviska. DJ Chark is now ruled out officially for the rest of the season. This was a list under 50%. He was right around that 53%. So it's a good call just to take a look at to see who was dropped, because with all those teams on bye, people may have to drop like really good players just to get that win. Joe, wish we had more time, dude. Always a pleasure, man, to chop it up with you. Fantastic. I can't wait to join you again. I believe next week we'll talk a little DFS. Tell people quickly where they can catch you all your work, man.
Well, over at Fantasy Pros, obviously, and of course at Sports Grid every Sunday, doing the Sunday morning football show 8 to 10 a.m. Myself and Craig Mish and Matt Stryker, the Matt Stryker. And of course, follow me on the Twitter machine at Joe Pisapia 17. And I can't wait to next week chop it up and talk DFS with my boy Chris Meaney on the Fantasy Pros pod. So check that out as well. Be ready.
I'll be ready, man. And good luck to the Lady Titans. Get that bye and have a strong second half of the season. Joe Pisapia 17 right there. Make sure you are following on Twitter, and you're going to want to get that baseball book come Christmas time. All right, we're going to keep things going here. Got some NFL picks and some hockey picks as well. Keep her locked. All right, welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. 3 more segments here. Going to talk a little hockey and some NFL picks here for this evening. So this is what I'm thinking from a pick standpoint with some props. I don't think we'll see a lot of offense in this game, so I got the under 42. Both teams play at a slow pace. The Saints certainly play at a slow pace. They want to run the football. And, Geno Smith didn't look all that great last week against the Steelers in terms of, yards per play. It was very, very mediocre. But I do think that they can cover at home at plus 4.5. You can find this in some spots at 4.5. I know Sean Payton off of bye, and, the Seahawks offense is really not all that appealing, but I think they can do enough here at home, right? Nobody really thought that they were going to cover against the Steelers last week in Pittsburgh. They did okay. And you can throw in the middle of the field on the Saints, so maybe we could see, a couple receptions there from a guy like Tyler Lockett at 45.5 receiving yards. It really only takes one reception for him to get to that number. I think, where some people may have some pause with some of these picks is Alex Collins. It does look like Collins is good to go. Pete Carroll said he's ready to rock. I know a lot of people are talking about Rashad Penny, and he was on the waiver wire list there. It's just like a stash. I'm not a big Rashad Penny guy. I'm rooting for him, a former first-round pick. I'd like to see him have success in the NFL. His first game back here, I think he's just going to be a change-of-pace guy. The Saints do have a really strong run defense, but this is a pretty low prop here for Alex Collins, over 12.5 carries and 44.5 rushing yards. And for Alex Collins, he has games with 10 and 44. That was splitting time with Chris Carson, 15 for 47. Then last week, 20 for 101. I think they still try to establish the run here a little bit. So to get to 13 carries is not too much, and he can break one and get to that 44.5. As for Alvin Kamara at 91.5 rushing yards, this may seem a little high too, but Seattle's allowed the third most rushing yards per game at 140, and Kamara's rushing attempt prop is at 21.5. This guy is going to get 20 carries. 20 for 93, 24 for 89, 26 for 120. These are some of the games that Alvin Kamara has had this season. He hasn't been that efficient running the rock, but he has gotten the ball quite a bit, and he's not catching as many passes as we're used to seeing. As I mentioned, they're playing at a slow pace here. So I think Alvin Kamara could get to the century mark on the ground. Henry had a $182. Madison had 112. Trey Sermon's done nothing all year except for the game that he did play against the Saints, against Seattle, rather. He had 89. Henderson had 80+, and Harris had 80+ as well. Najee just last week. So I do believe that Alvin Kamara will touch the ball 20+ times in this game, so I think he can get to that rushing yard prop. As for Marquez Callaway at 42.5 receiving yards, we got no Deontay Harris in this game. I don't think Traquan Smith is ready to come back. If he does, as he could be limited. We know Michael Thomas is not going to play here either. So for Callaway last week, 4 for 85, 159 yards in his last 2 weeks. This is another guy, a deep A-dot. It really doesn't take a whole lot for him to get to that receiving yard mark. So that's what I'm thinking from a prop standpoint. There's a whole lot more over at ftnbets.com. And a reminder, ftnbets.com/pricing. Use that promo code MeanStreets or NHL. Save yourself 20% because we got some hockey picks in here next. But if you are subscribed, you get all the picks across every single sport over at ftnbets.com. And speaking of hockey, we got a few picks for you next year on Mean Streets. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. We see a comment there from Jason Prince. Salute to the NHL Prop King. Glad you have your own show. Appreciate you, Jason. Appreciate the support. Hopefully we can continue here with some shot props. We're up to about 10 units now in the NHL, so starting to get a bit of a feel. Let's start here with just some straight picks, and then in the next segment to wrap up the show, we'll do some shot props. So this is what I'm thinking from an NHL pick standpoint. There's only a handful of games in the NHL here tonight. There are 7 games, so I'm not touching every single one, but as you see, Washington atop the board. Now, this is just at minus 156. You can get in on it now. I think this probably gets up to minus 165. I'd take it as high as minus 160, maybe include it into a parlay if you want. Washington playing in Ottawa against the Senators. You know, the Capitals are off to a pretty good start here this season. I think they're just a much better team. The Senators are scrappy. They got really one line really that's good. It's the top line with Norris, Tkachuk, and Batherson. They got some question marks in goal. So give me Washington on the money line. And this is what's interesting here. How could you pick the Florida Panthers by 2 at minus 160? You're nuts. It's crazy. I also have in the bet tracker at 0.25 units for them to win by 3 goals. Maybe I'm jinxing them. I don't think I am. Arizona is just not a good hockey team. We've talked about it on this show quite a bit. The Coyotes are just not good. They had one game this season where they allowed 8 goals, another game this season where they allowed 7 goals. They were shut out against the Islanders. Over the weekend, we had the Islanders in a massive parlay that we hit. That's why we're up a couple units here at FTN. We had the Islanders to win on the money line and on the puck line to win by 2 goals, and they won 3-0. So this Florida team is legit. You guys have heard me talk about them probably way too much. You don't want to hear it anymore, but they're really good. I mean, they beat Colorado. They've beaten Tampa. They're now almost cup favorites. Like, they have gone from 24-1 to 12-1 a week and a half into the NHL season, 2 weeks into the NHL season. That's it. Maybe 2.5. I don't know. It's October. All the sports are happening. I have no idea. I just know we're almost 3 weeks. There we'll go. 3 weeks into the NHL season. The Panthers, in my opinion, are the best team in the NHL. I'm not over. That's it. They're the best team in the league. That's what I truly believe. And Carolina over at Toronto here. Frederik Andersen, a little revenge spot against his Leafs. Just maybe I'm going to get burned here by the Leafs. I mean, they just got worked over the weekend against Pittsburgh. They lost 7-1. The Penguins were without Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Jeff Carter. Who else? I think they were without another player too. Brian Rust. Like, they were without their 5 best players, and they worked over Toronto. I'm sure we'll see a much better effort from the Leafs, but Carolina's a good hockey team. They're very sound. They got 3 solid lines. They're strong defensively. So I'm just going to pick on the Leafs here until I see them turn it up. And yeah, it remains to be seen. And then the under in Calgary and New York. Igor Shesterkin's been fantastic. I like Jacob Markstrom. I think that's a low-scoring affair. And then Dallas and Columbus here at under 5.5. Look for Braden Holtby. If Holtby gets the start, I feel much better about this. If Holtby doesn't get the start, maybe we want to cool off of it because it's minus 120, but I don't think we'll see a lot of offense. I typically typically take unders when it comes to the Flames. I don't think that they score a lot of goals and they're strong defensively. And the same thing can be said about Dallas. They don't score a lot of goals. They're strong defensively. And Braden Holtby has been an absolute stud. I got the Fantasy Hockey Waiver Wire article over at ftnfantasy.com, and it is led by Braden Holtby. You're running out of time. Pick up that guy where you can. He's a top 15 goalie for me the rest of the way. All right, some shot props in here next. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue things here on Mean Streets. Welcome back to Mean Streets here one final time. Yeah, George, my guy George, 3 putts for par. He says he wasn't happy. Dude, you picked the wrong parlay. We had like 4 parlays there that were successful. And of course, the Leafs were the one to screw it on a 5-game parlay, 4 for 5. We got another one going here today, George. Let's do some shot props. We'll get some shot props. We'll round out the show with this. Unfortunately, not a lot of time to dive into it. And look how sexy this board is. I mean, oh my goodness. And that's how I tape my stick too. I go front to back, full tape job there. So here we go. We got Andrei Specinicoff at 2.5 shots. He's got 21 shots in 4 games. He's cleared 2.5 in all of his games. He's off to a really strong start too. 4 goals and 7 points. Ovechkin's the one I like the least here on this board, but he's a volume shooter. 5 goals, 10 points through 5 games. He's only cleared 3.5 twice this season, but it's a really good spot against the Sens. I expect them to own the puck here today. A couple power plays and Ovi's, getting those 4 shots for us. But I do like Sam Bennett, Dustin Brown, and Matthew Tkachuk a little bit more. Bennett has cleared 2.5 in 4 of his 5 games this season. And the one game that he didn't, he hit the bar twice. So we got unlucky. In fact, he's cleared 2.5 shots in 14 of his past 17 games dating back to last season. We talked about the cake matchup here against Arizona. Dustin Brown is cleared in 4 of his 5. Not last game. He only played 13 minutes is because the Kings were down 7-3. They were out of the game, and I think they just started to roll 4 lines. Usually, Dustin Brown is a guy who gets about 20 minutes ice time per game. St. Louis, again, a much better effort from the Kings, especially from their top line. Matthew Tkachuk, 18 shots in 4 games. Only 2 in his last 2, but this is a number that I like here. I'll always take Matthew Tkachuk over 2.5. You can get that at plus money as well. For more, check out ftnbets.com. A shout out to my guy, George, for making the graphics, and for Jason Prince for hanging out with us the entire show just to get the shot props. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great one. Cheers.